Hey there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. And every single week, we bring local leaders to this podcast to talk about their story, their journey, and how their company is succeeding, and to get a little bit of advice, how all of you can learn from them and succeed in your own businesses. And today, I am really excited because we are joined by Harsha Bellur. He is the CIO of James Avery Jewelers. Hey, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
So here's the interesting thing, right? When we think of tech companies in Austin, going back 30 years, there were tech companies and there were all the other companies. And I can remember that was very much the vibe. It was tech companies and other companies. But today, all companies are tech companies because everybody is tech enabled. Everybody is using tech to drive their business. So if you're not familiar with Harsha, what he does is he operates at that cross section of business and technology. He's responsible for influencing how tech drives the business at James Avery Jewelry. He looks at strategy, he looks at business, he looks at revenue, he looks at costs, and he brings it all together with his experience to help influence the ways tech is going to drive that business. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But first, I want to start with your journey. Where did you start in the world of business? Where'd you go to school? How did you get into IT?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Again, thanks for having me on the show. Really excited to spend a few minutes here with you to share my story. I would say I had probably one of the most unlikely step into technology. I grew up in India. My dad was an entrepreneur. He ran an iron and steel business. Basically, I think he started the business 2 years prior to me being born. So you could say I kind of grew with the business. And so from a very young age, as one of the eldest son, I was heir apparent to that business. And so I spent a lot of time in my early days, summer vacations meant being in the business, going to my dad's factory. And my job was really answering the phone. As he was just starting up, he really did not staff for all the office work. And my job was to sit in front of the phone and just answer the phone and make notes of who called and why they called and just report that back to my dad at the end of the day. And so he could follow up. So through that journey, I learned a lot just in terms of, understanding what the business concepts are and understanding, how difficult it is to acquire customers, how product quality matters, and how you set pricing. While I did not appreciate a whole lot of those things at that point in time, it was just those exposure at such an young age that kind of just shapes who you are as you get along with your career. So the key moment in which I stepped into tech was 1985, I believe, is when I was maybe 11 or 12. And then that's the time he introduced computers in his factory. And I got my hands to it. And now I'm sitting in the office, doing what I always do, answering phones. But while the phone was not ringing, I'm just dabbling with this new computer device. And that really got me more excited. And so all of a sudden, I started to look forward to go to the factory because I could get my hands on the computers rather than just sitting there for the phone to ring. And so long story short, I got really excited with that. I did my undergrad in telecommunications because telecom was really the thing in the 80s. And then I pursued to complete my master's in computer science. And all along, I was still, kind of helping my dad with this industry. But then at the end of my master's program, I got an opportunity to, the capstone project was, as part of the curriculum, I had to do a work in one of the companies, not other than my own company or my dad's company. So I ended up at Wipro Technologies. So Wipro is a global tech services company that based in India. And so that was my first foray into kind of a professional organization. And I had great success in my capstone project. And my intent was to finish the project and, kind of go back to my dad's business. Literally 2 or 3 months after the project, the VP of that company called me with a job offer to say, hey, I would love for you to lead the project. That they were actually implementing an ERP system. And then they wanted me to lead that for a given division. My first job, I had about 8 direct reports, which was very interesting. And if you are wondering how that could happen, it's basically that experience that I've had over the last 10, 12 years running the business is how I approached my intern project. I was talking to customers that were ultimately going to be the recipient of that. I was talking to all the stakeholders. I was focusing more on the people than on the tactical stuff of what I was supposed to do. I was trying to understand how this was going to fit, how that would change the environment in which, the company was operating. And that was not a concept that was, prevalent in those days. And it was all about, hey, we're implementing a new system and, you're going to get a new system that you're going to use tomorrow. And we had very little input from the people that were actually going to be the users of that. So that was kind of a perspective I bought. And then, I got an offer. My dad was very supportive. He said, yeah, if that's what you want, interests you, we want to do that, go ahead and do that. And then that job, I spent about 2 years, and that brought me to the United States. So in 1998, around the Y2K, to 99, I don't know if you recall that Y2K was a thing.
In fact, it was as big of a thing in the news as AI is today, right? It's all we talked about for 3 years.
Absolutely. And I cannot tell you the anxiety and all that. It was kind of a ticking time bomb in a sense in many organizations. Nobody really knew what would happen at the dawn of the 21st century. So anyway, so then I spent some time there. But when I came to the United States, I worked at a number of different companies. I worked at software companies, but I was never finding that combination, right? I was mostly in the tech. I was just doing, tech work as a consultant. I could not really see the value. I couldn't really engage as deep as I wanted to. So for about 2 years, I changed a lot of different jobs. I worked at a software company in Philadelphia. I worked at a manufacturing company after that in Philadelphia. And then it took me to Richmond, Virginia, as that shift where I again went to solve for the Y2K problem. But during that time, they also were implementing a global CRM system. And it just so happened, I was trying to grab a print from one of the printers, and I saw this job posting printed out there. I don't even know who sent that print job. And that job got really interesting to me because it said it's a global CRM. It's a customer relationship. And, it's kind of, hey, I'm all about customers. I'm all about engaging and understanding customers. So it just got me excited. I went to my boss and said, hey, I found this job description. I don't know who this is, but I would love to be part of it. And my boss, it apparently was a tech job, and he was thrilled. He's like, oh my gosh, if you are interested in that, that's your job to take. And so essentially I took that job, I think in the year 2000, and adopted all of the principles that I've developed over the years, really looking at the business, in 2000, I developed the first handheld or a mobile application using Palm Trio or Palm OS, because the CRM applications were all desktop applications. And then, the sales guys are always on the road. So just applying the concept of, hey, how do we look at a solution in the context of the people that use it? And what's the point if I have the world's best software that you have to be at a desk to operate when your job is always putting you on the road? So that's innovation, or that kind of creativity allowed me to develop that. And in 2000, we were awarded the best CRM implementation in the worldwide global implementation, because the mobile application was not something that was heard of. So that really got me a lot of attention, a lot of press coverage, a lot of attention. And so I had an accelerated growth path to various senior levels within the company. And then, about 6 years at AMF Bowling in Richmond, Virginia, I became the CIO of the company. So I was 32 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, and not a single gray hair, and a very slim body frame. Nobody took me seriously, I can tell you that. But so I had to work through. But I felt like my years of just development and having that business context always, plus the technical competency, got me to gain respect over a period of time. And what was interesting during my time at AMF Bowling is, bowling, if as an industry, had historically been a league business, and what they refer to as a league business. And so that was a declining line of business. Very few people were repeat customers. That bowling as a sport was declining. Professional sport was declining, but bowling as a leisure sport was kind of gaining traction. But if you think about the bowling alleys of the 80s and 90s, it was mostly men. Smoking inside, it was a very different environment.
Oh, my dad was an active bowler in bowling leagues when I was growing up. I spent a lot of time in smoky bars inside bowling.
Exactly. You know what that is. And
I can actually, as you're telling the story, I can smell the smoke, and I can feel the sticky floor from all the beer.
Well, let's not even talk about the shoes, okay?
Yeah. Who wants a sport where you have to wear another man's shoes?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, so what the industry? So, AMF Bowling was the world's largest bowling operator. They had about 500, 600 bowling facilities across the United States, and so. The industry was changing, and so AMF also had to change itself as a business, but by changing itself, it was also changing the industry, so to speak, because of the largest owner-operator. And so because of the declining league revenue, the company was focused more on attracting leisure bowlers and turning bowling alleys into family entertainment centers. So that was going from a very cash solid business, repetitive revenue business to a more dynamic consumer business now. And so I was there during that transition period and really got a front row to changing that industry as we change our business, introducing, marketing programs, introducing, loyalty programs and new websites and reservation systems and things like that.
Well, and at that time, bowling alleys became computerized, right? Because all of a sudden the scorecards went away about that time, and so you had computers running all the scoring.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to not only get technology in, but to do that at scale. And, it's not just computers in terms of scoring. There's a lot of audio, visual, kind of enrichment, large screen. So delivery of the content. So a lot of things had to happen in a very short period of time. And I had, as my first CIO job at that young age, it was just the perfect moment for me to hone in and maximize kind of my exposure and experience as a technology leader. So I had the most amazing learning experience over those 6 years. And because we were owned by private equity, time was of essence. And we were well funded and well supported. So I had the privilege also of a wonderful CEO who supported, who was obviously mandated to bring about this change. And so just, having that mandate at the CEO level and technology being on the forefront of that transformation. So I had a great time. So I was there for 13 years at AMF. And when I got a call for James Avery here in Austin, I did not know anything about James Avery as a company. Obviously, today we are celebrating 70 years. So it's been a company that's been out there for a while, but I had not heard it. It's a very Texas thing, much like a lot of other Texas brands, HEBs and, Whataburgers, and you name it. Um, so it's James Avery is a family company, family-owned company, and the son of the founder, James Avery is the founder. The son of the founder, Chris Avery, was the CEO 12 years ago when I came on board. And he actually, during the interview process, he mentioned, and here's an interesting fact. This Chris Avery, the CEO, is actually a board certified physician, and he left his practice to come run the business. And so for me personally, that was a little bit of a nostalgia, because I left my dad's business and came on my own, and here I find a reverse osmosis, if you will, of somebody who is in the profession coming back to his dad's business. So it was very intriguing. And I love just talking to Chris because as a physician, he was very logical, and he had the foresight. He's like, hey, I don't know anything about technology, but I know one thing, that technology is very important to our business and sustainability of the business going forward. And I really need a leader that's going to come and drive a vision and help us be competitive as a business going into the future for the next, 50, 70, 100 years. Hey, again, music to my ears. And I always, when I was at AMF, we had a lot of facilities in Austin. And so whenever I was in Austin, I loved the city. I was like, oh my gosh, I love Austin. And so while I wasn't necessarily looking for a change, the fact that Austin was the place I was going to be got me excited. So I responded to that call, and 12 years later, here we are. And so a lot of what we do at James Avery is exactly that. It's the intersection of technology and business.
So you've had a really amazing kind of story. The story arc of your life and your career is really interesting. There's a couple things you hit on that I want to go back to. And one was, first of all, that you said that, your dad in India in 1985 started introducing computers into the business. So your dad had to be ahead of the game when it came to computers, right? Because, barely in the United States were we seeing computers coming into business at that level in the early mid 80s. And so was your dad kind of a visionary? Was he one of these people who looked two steps ahead?
He absolutely was. And, there's so many stories I can recall that at the moment I thought was very frustrating. So one of the things that, because prior to that, it was all ledger books and manual. And I remember if he wanted to get a statement of all the account receivables, and that was one of the things I had to do. That's why I vividly remember that moment. And he's like, and I'm like, okay, how do I do this? He's like, okay, you're going to go to this ledger, look up all the vendors, and go to this ledger, and then look up all the transactions, and then you go to tally up all the cash payments. That I'm like, what? Not something I was interested in when I was 15, but but you're absolutely right. I think when the computers came up, and that was kind of the early days, and it was an expensive investment too. And so one of the things that I always, this is kind of another one of those concepts or principles. My dad was always about value, right? He's like, as far as I remember, for the most part of my early years, maybe 15, 20 years, we always lived in a rental home, because if he said, if I have money to invest, I would not put on a home, I'll put it in my business. And so we always lived in a rental home. So it was always about value. And so when he invested in computers, which was a rather expensive thing, he clearly saw the value that it could bring in terms of efficiency, in terms of just maybe accuracy. Like I cannot imagine how many errors might have occurred when you have to, find one data point amongst 6 books.
Well, and another thing you talked about was that, when you did that capstone program, one of the things that you had an advantage on was that you had hands-on experience working in business, that probably a lot of people who were getting master's degrees in computer science didn't have, a decade of answering the phones and dealing with customers and tracking down the accounts receivable and payable. And so, having that tactical experience rather than just learning strategy, How important is that for someone who is a CIO or aspires to be a CIO? Because today people seem to be so niched into this is my expertise and they don't look beyond. How important is having that broad business experience for a CIO?
Well, actually, it's interesting you bring that up because I missed to tell you one component. So when I alluded to the fact that, without a single gray hair and a slim profile, nobody cared about what I had to say. So that really, I was asking myself, like, what, I'm in a room, I'm in a board meeting, with folks that are 20, 30 years older than me. And I felt like I was not being heard, particularly with my own level of confidence and self-awareness of what I think I can bring. So I actually enrolled in an MBA program at Virginia Commonwealth University. So while I was doing my first CIO job, I was also doing an MBA program because I felt maybe that's what is going to help kind of the world look at me for who I am as a broad business man with technical expertise, as opposed to a technology person who may not understand business. So it was hard for me to articulate that. So I completed my MBA. And then that, honestly, as soon as I started putting MBA against my profile, it just changed how folks perceived me. And I could be the last in my class. It didn't matter.
That's the old joke is, what do you call the person who graduates from medical school with the lowest GPA? You call them doctor, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but yeah, coming back to your point, I think, what I tell my team today and anybody that I mentor is that you really need to understand the context. That's really the key, right? Whether you're a product company, whether you're a jewelry company that is, using technology, a product company that's selling technology, if you don't understand how your customers are going to apply or what specific problems or challenges you're trying to solve, and make it easy for them, right? It's not just a solution. It has to apply what I refer to as in the context of the customer's environment, right? So I can give you so many examples where, we create a slick mobile application and we deploy that to our stores, and it doesn't work because the stores operate in a mall environment where cell signals are weak. Okay, well, if I don't take that into context, my solution, as great as it might be, is unusable. So this principle of design thinking or human-centric thinking and just taking that into account in how we do that. And so the same applies from a business perspective. If somebody in our manufacturing operation say, well, I want to implement a new manufacturing operation system, my first question is, can we talk about what, to me, that is like you are telling me a solution already. I'm like, can we talk about exactly what are you trying to solve? So go back to the problem, understand the problem. And so as a tech leader, you have to be able to converse with a wide variety, at least in a business like ours. We have retail, we have e-commerce, we have digital marketing, supply chain, manufacturing. So I have to be able to have, or I should make my peers comfortable enough to engage in a dialogue with me. I guess, it's kind of the way, again, looking at from an outside in as opposed to what I can do. I need to kind of understand and be empathetic to where they're coming from. And then bring my technical skills to say, okay, here's how I think we can solve your problem.
So one of the other things that you talked about, and there were several little nuggets of this along the way, is what I would call, for lack of a better term, in your career trajectory, a little bit of luck, right? Being in the right place at the right time, right? You happen to be a teenager in the 80s when computers came to be. And we hear so much about so many of the leaders from the 70s and the 80s who've created our entire tech ecosystem around the world. A lot of them, they just happened to be in the right place and they had access because their parents had a computer at work, or there's all kinds of stories about that. So that was the first thing. The second thing was, you said there was that job was just sitting there on the printer. If it hadn't been sitting there on the printer, you might not have gone that direction because you may not have known about the job. And then coming to the United States, working in technology in 1998, I mean, that was when things were exploding, right? 1997 is what I sort of call, the year the internet and technology sort of started to go bang. And so you got here right as that was happening. All of those things. How important for somebody who's building a career do you think luck plays into it? And I always tell people, how do you set yourself up for that luck?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think the short answer to your question is yes. Was luck a factor? Yes, but we can characterize it in any number of ways. One is you're always looking out for the next opportunity. So luck doesn't drop on your lap just if you're sitting on your couch. You have to kind of continually be curious, and you're continually exploring for what that next opportunity is. And so just to kind of give you a perspective, as I noted, when I first got, my principle in life had always been, okay, when I got elevated to the next level in my career, I always asked myself, if something were to go wrong tomorrow, how do I make myself continue on this trajectory as opposed to falling back to what I had been over the last, many years? So when I became the CIO for the first time, I said, okay, I'm going to get my MBA so I can sustain this executive path. And so after about a couple of years, I did a leadership program in Harvard because now I'm going from a manager to I want to elevate my leadership level. And then, as recently as 6 months ago, or during COVID, I should say, I enrolled because we were all, remote, I enrolled in a board readiness course at Harvard. So I'm always continually looking for how do I grow and continue to learn from where I am today. And so as you work, somehow, somewhere, you happen to be at the right place at the right time. And so, yeah, we can call that luck. But you cannot be lucky and be incompetent.
Well, I agree. I tell people all the time. My brother once told me I was the luckiest person he knew, and I said, yeah, but I set myself up for luck and I recognize it when it comes by. So exactly. I think that you're saying the same thing. Is you've got to position yourself and you got to recognize it, when it comes along. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about this idea of all companies are now tech companies. Because I remember 30 years ago in Austin, there was that sort of divide, right? That's how the Austin Technology Council, originally the Austin Software Council, was founded, because there were all these businesses in Austin, but nobody was paying attention to the startups. Nobody was paying attention to how different the tech business was 30 years ago. And so that's how the community sort of became this little shift to the side of the tech community. But now you can be a jewelry company, you can be HEB, you can be John Deere. They're all tech companies when you really look at what they do. So what has been that shift that you've seen? Because you've lived it. You've come from the bowling industry and the jewelry industry as a CIO. What is that shift that now everybody is a tech company?
Yeah, no, that is so true. I think Howard Schultz, many, many years ago, made that comment saying Starbucks is not a coffee company, it's a tech company that happens to sell coffee. And so when you look at, our world today, it's a digitally connected world. And so as a consumer company, again, going back to the principle of, hey, how are our consumers living and shopping and interacting today? It's social media, it's influencers, it's, online, it's your mobile app. So when our consumers are operating in a certain space, how can, a company then cater to that consumer if you're also not, aligned to that consumer behavior? So the first and foremost is just aligning to your customers' expectations and patterns. The second is really around efficiencies, right? So even with AI these days, the thing that most people talk about is efficiency. It's nothing more than yeah, it used to take me 8 hours to read a document. Now I can get that summarized in, 8 minutes or 8 seconds. So it's really time efficiency. And so that's where technology has always been at the core is as companies, try to eke out that extra, margins in their bottom line or operate in a competitive marketplace in terms of the products or services they sell. Technology has become a real enabler in making sure that we're able to reduce the cost of doing business, if you will. I remember early days, in fact, at the AMF, when there was a concept called business continuity planning, BCP. And this was really about working out a plan that when your technology fails, how do you continue to operate your business? And so we would come up with a set of manual procedures on how we would do it. Today, I chuckle when somebody says we need a BCP plan. I'm like, how do you foresee operating your business if your technology failed? I mean, so the concept of BCP is now no longer a manual process. The concept of BCP is disaster recovery. Like, how do I create, backups and backups to backups and regional and geographies and whatever. So we're talking about technology resiliency in lieu of business continuity. That was kind of the narrative, 15, 20 years ago. So that speaks to kind of the importance of how tech-enabled our businesses are, whether it's from, clocking in and clocking out to get to your job, to getting, looking up a customer record or past purchases or just getting a internal communication bulletin. All of this is now digitally enabled. We're no longer printing books and papers and manuals. And I always ask my team, and whenever we do release notes and we have to develop training materials, and I ask my team, when's the last time any one of you opened a box and the first thing you read was a manual, the instruction manual, right? Nobody does that.
So looking at James Avery Jewelry as a company, what about it is exciting? What do you wish people knew? Because I don't think people think tech company that relies on tech when they think of where they're going to get an engagement ring or a watch or something like that. What should everybody know about the company?
Well, actually, we've been in business for 70 years. So one of the fancy names we use for James Avery, so we're a vertically integrated company. And what that means is that we control every aspect of our business. So from designers, we have dedicated designers on staff who are artists, and they start with a sketch. So they are creative artists. They start with a sketch of the products and design inspired by any number of things, inspired by customer feedback, inspired by nature, inspired by experiences, what have you, or seasonalities. And then those designs are then we use 3D CAD designs and 3D printing to prototype those the actual designs on paper into digital logical models. And then we take that in prototype in 3D printing. So that is like one example of where technology and application comes into play. Now, once we do that prototyping, and I'll tell you about 10% of our overall designs actually make it to an actual product. So 90% are rejected, and they're rejected for a number of reasons. There could be the most beautiful designs, but we cannot actually make that into a physical product that people can wear, and it's durable and it's cost effective, right? So there's so many aspects to that, and all of that is enabled through that component. The second aspect of it is really from there we take it to manufacturing. So manufacturing, it's a craftsman company. We have a lot of people that actually design and make the product, and all of this is based in Texas. In fact, we are 2 hours away in Hill Country where most of our factories are, and one of our newest factory now, we call it Craftsman Center, we just opened in Corpus Christi. So all of our products are made in Texas, designed in Texas, made in Texas, and then all the manufacturing technology. So we integrate into all of the operating technologies, the ovens and the polishing machines, and the tool and dyeing, which the CNC machines. So there's a lot of OT machines that is part of our overall technology portfolio, and we have integrated our what is traditionally an information technology into the operational technology. So that's very exciting in what my team is responsible for. And then as you move down that chain, we have supply chain. So supply chain is a function that tries to balance our demand to our production, and so that's all about forecasting and making sure that we are able to, and we use a lot of high-end sophisticated ML models to develop those forecasting. And then we go into retail. So retail is we have about 135 stores, I think, as of today. And so all the technologies in retail, from our point of sale systems to payment systems, to all the digital signage that we have, all of that, again, is technology. We have e-commerce, so anything around e-commerce. So I'm just talking about the general line, and then we have HR systems, and we have corporate collaborative systems like Zoom and what have you. Marketing technologies is an interesting space because marketing, as I used to do, was all about, hey, I'm going to spend $1 million, and I hope we'll get 1 or 2% lift on that. But we couldn't necessarily tell like which program did what. It was kind of more a matter of aggregations. But today we are more specific. Marketing tech has allowed us to be so precise that I can tell you, I put a digital sign, a pop-up ad to Tom, and Tom clicked on it, and that converted because he went online. I mean, there's so much tracking that we're able to do now. All of that technology is driven by, and the intelligence is driven by data. So we have to talk about data. So we have such a large, set of data sets that we have from manufacturing to retail to e-commerce. How do we collate all this and create the intelligence that we need? So if you ask the question, like, what does the jewelry company do with technology? I mean, oh my gosh, I can tell you, we probably use more technology than you would expect even in a typical tech company because of the diversity of our environment. So tech company, a product company, well, yeah, a lot of your tech is focused on one thing. Here our tech, it literally includes everything. I mean, I didn't even talk about security, right? So we won't go there.
So that's fascinating to me, actually. But so here's the final question, right? So you've lived in Austin, I think you said around 12 years, something like that. Yeah. What do you see happening in the Austin tech community, and what do you think is the good, the bad, the ugly of the future? What are we doing right, and what do we need to do more of in Austin?
I think Austin's gone through its hypes, and what I think we are seeing a moment where things are coming back to reality and some normalization. I've always enjoyed Austin and loved Austin just for the vibe and the community feel. We're a big city with a little town flavor, if you will. And I like the diversity. Even just speaking of tech, you have such a healthy startup ecosystem. You have the government functions. You have a pretty vast private enterprises. What I see is the opportunity, and I'm on the board of SIM, which is again a very a community that brings all tech leaders together. And so what we are looking forward to, just from a SIM perspective and even my own perspective, is if we can bring this diverse group together as one community, that would be awesome, because I see a lot of different clusters, if you will. The startup community is its own cluster, and the state and city government communities are its own cluster, and of course the large business enterprise are their own cluster. There's so much that we can give and take. I can tell you, I would love to see what startups are doing and how we can bring that into our business. And then, of course, if we can be a pilot, I would love to partner with somebody that's local. And then it also becomes a great insight and input for the startups to have access to industries like ours, where potentially their solution can come into play. So I would love to see more interaction. But what an exciting moment, Tom. I mean, Austin's got so many new entities that are either coming up here or moving here. such diversity of industries. I couldn't be more excited and optimistic about, where Austin is and where it can go.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think that the future really comes from all of these different groups really finding ways more to collaborate. I think competition amongst, leaders in the community and these different business groups, that's yesterday. And tomorrow really is. So ATC would love to find a way to partner with SIM on some sort of a project because we're already working with the Chamber and with Austin Women in Technology. And I think the more these groups can figure out ways to complement each other and support each other, the more the whole community wins rather than pulling everybody in different directions. So maybe we can talk later about how SIM and ATC can do something together. So
love to do that.
Say, before we wrap it up, any final words?
Hey, it's such a pleasure chatting with you. I could not believe we spent the last, 45 minutes or so. Always great chatting with you, Thom. So really appreciate you having me here. And, feel free to reach out to me if anybody wants to connect with me.
Nice. Well, this has been a great discussion. I do think it's something that we have to talk more about how all companies are tech companies and looking at the way that they're creating tech and they're utilizing tech and that it's impacting everything they do, even if they're a jewelry manufacturer. So thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened to this. You know what? If it wasn't for the audience, we wouldn't do this podcast. But the other day, one of the other podcasters in Austin who does a tech-related show asked ChatGPT, what are the top tech podcasts in Austin? And we came up in the top 3. So people are listening. Even ChatGPT knows that Austin Tech Connect is the show that you should be listening to. So make sure everybody that you're subscribed to the show and share it with all your friends who work in and around technology here in Austin. And make sure that your company is supporting the Austin Technology Council. You know what? We're trying to do some new things. We're trying to shake things up in 2005. We're trying to get more events that are really focused on best practices presented by best practicers. So I can't do that alone. I have to have the input from the community and I have to have the support from the community. So make sure that your company's involved with ATC and we will see you in 2025 because this is the last episode of this year. But get ready because we're going to kick off the year. I forget if it's the first or second one with episode number 100. We're getting really, really close to episode 100. So make sure that you are listening every single week in 2025. Thanks, everyone.